Everyone pictures the same dream. Buy the corner lot, put your name on the sign, and watch cars line up to hand you cash all day. In December 2011, a company leasing nearly 800 gas stations across the Northeast filed for bankruptcy, with its landlord repossessing the real estate out from under it within weeks. Here is what this actually costs. Start with the franchise fee if you go branded. Shell, BP, and Chevron licenses run $5,000 to $50,000, depending on the brand and territory. That fee buys you the sign and the supply agreement, nothing else. Land is the first real expense, and it swings wildly. $50,000 in a quiet town, over $1 million on a high-traffic corner with 25,000 plus vehicles passing daily. Construction or renovation to bring a site up to code runs $500,000 to $2 million. Underground storage tanks and dispensers are their own category. A full UST and pump installation is a major line item before a single gallon is sold. Then the hidden regulatory cost nobody budgets for: environmental compliance. A leak detection system for a typical station with 3 5,000-gallon tanks costs thousands on its own. And federal EPA rules require every UST owner to prove financial responsibility through state funds or pollution liability insurance before they're even allowed to open. The average tank upgrade to meet EPA standards runs about $100,000. Beyond the tanks themselves, permitting adds its own layer: fire marshal sign-off, State Petroleum Board registration, air quality permits for vapor recovery systems, and local zoning approval, each with its own fee and inspection timeline that can delay opening by months. Signage that meets brand standards for a major flag can run tens of thousands of dollars on its own, since franchisors typically mandate specific canopy design, lighting, and pump island branding rather than leaving it to the owner's discretion. Add licensing, a fuel supply agreement, initial fuel inventory, and working capital to cover payroll before revenue stabilizes. And total startup cost for a branded station lands between $250,000 and $2 million. Larger, high-traffic conversions have run past $2 million before the first customer pulls in. Fuel supply cost exists because you don't set your own wholesale price. Most branded stations sign exclusive supply agreements, locking them into one distributor's rack price, which moves daily with the commodity market. Payroll runs continuously across cashiers, attendants, and shift managers, whether the pumps are busy or empty, because the store still has to be staffed for the C-store and the register. Credit card processing exists because most fuel purchases are now plastic, and it's expensive. Card fees averaged 8.4 cents per gallon in 2023, the highest on record, according to NACS data. That's a cost with no negotiating room for a small operator. The card network set it, not the station. Underground storage tank compliance is recurring, not one time. Monthly leak detection monitoring, annual line testing, and periodic inspections required to maintain that financial responsibility insurance policy. Insurance itself runs high because of the risk profile. Fuel tank contamination coverage, general liability, and workers' comp stack into a bill far larger than a typical retail storefront carries, specifically because of what's buried under the concrete. Utilities run higher than a comparable retail footprint too, since pump islands, canopy lighting, and 24-hour refrigeration for the C-store all draw power around the clock, regardless of how many cars pull in. Inventory shrink and cash handling losses are their own recurring line. Theft, drive-offs where a customer pumps and leaves without paying, and register discrepancies all get budgeted as an ongoing percentage of sales rather than a one-time surprise. Lease or mortgage payments continue whether gallons move or not, and franchise royalty plus mandatory contributions to the brand's advertising fund come out of every gallon sold under that flag. Stack fuel supply cost, payroll, card fees, tank compliance, insurance, utilities, shrink, lease, and royalties. And a mid-sized branded station is carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual fixed and variable cost before counting a single dollar of gross profit. Here's where the dream gets thin. The average fuel gross margin across the industry was approximately 35.7 cents per gallon in 2025, according to NACS. That sounds workable, until you subtract the 8.4 cents per gallon lost to card processing fees, which leaves roughly 27 cents of real margin on a card-paid gallon. A single station owner-operator pumping 80,000 to 150,000 gallons a month is looking at maybe $5,000 to $15,000 a month in fuel profit alone, after card fees, but before every other cost in Section 2. The real money is supposed to come from inside sales, the convenience store, tobacco, food service, and lottery, which NACS data shows contributes a larger share of gross profit than fuel at most attached stores. Combine both revenue streams, and a typical single-station operator nets $40,000 to $100,000 a year. High-volume stores with strong food programs can clear $150,000 to $300,000. But on fuel alone, margins run 5 to 15 cents a gallon after card fees, meaning a station pumping 100,000 gallons a month generates just $5,000 to $15,000 in fuel profit on tens of thousands of dollars in monthly fuel purchases. The margin on the product everyone associates with the business is almost an afterthought. Put another way, a station can move $30,000 to $40,000 worth of gasoline in a single day and walk away with less real profit than a single decent shift at the register selling coffee and cigarettes. That gap between what flows through the pumps and what actually lands as profit is the single most misunderstood number in this entire industry. That thin margin assumes the wholesale price behaves. History says it doesn't. Every gallon in the ground was bought at a wholesale price locked in on delivery day, and that price moves independently of what the pump can charge tomorrow. On July 11, 2008, crude oil hit $147.27 a barrel. By December 2008, it had crashed to $30.28 a barrel, a roughly 79% collapse in 5 months. For a station holding thousands of gallons in underground tanks, that kind of swing rewrites the value of inventory overnight. Buy fuel at a high wholesale price, and if the market craters before you sell it, competitors who bought later are pricing you out of your own market. Buy at a low price ahead of a spike, and the reverse happens. But that's the exception, not the rule, in an industry running on razor-thin, order-of-cents margins to begin with. This isn't a one-time event. Wholesale fuel prices move on OPEC decisions, refinery outages, and currency shifts an individual station owner has zero visibility into and zero ability to hedge against, at the scale a single location owner operates. In 2011, one operator running nearly 800 stations found out what happens when that pricing pressure meets a landlord dispute over who pays for what's buried underground. Getty Petroleum Marketing, Inc. leased approximately 800 gas stations and convenience stores across the Northeast from its landlord, Getty Realty, a real estate investment trust that owned more than 900 properties nationwide. At its peak, GPMI was the largest tenant Getty Realty had. The company had been locked in a bitter, ongoing dispute with its landlord over who was responsible for paying to remediate environmental contamination at its gas stations. The same underground tank liability every station owner carries, just multiplied across 800 locations. In November 2011, Getty Realty formally notified GPMI it was terminating the master lease for non-payment of rent and moving to repossess the properties. On December 4, 2011, GPMI filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, listing assets of $50 million to $100 million against liabilities in the same range. The bankruptcy estate later settled with creditors for a $93 million payout, and creditors separately sued the executives who had bought the company from Lukoil for $1, accusing them of pulling more than $6 million out of what the lawsuit called a grossly insolvent operation in under a year. This was not one bad location or one bad manager. Environmental liability, thin fuel margins, and a landlord dispute collapsed 800 stations at once. That is industry structure, not incompetence. Here's a cost that eats a projection alive without ever showing up as a separate line. Card processing fees calculated per transaction, not per gallon budgeted. Walk through a real fill-up. A customer pays for 10 gallons at $3.76 a gallon, a $37.60 transaction. At an average 2.5% card processing rate, that's roughly 94 cents gone to the card network before the station has covered a cent of its own fuel cost. Across a full tank, industry data pegs the card fee hit at around 8 to 9 cents per gallon. On a sale that only had 27 cents of gross margin to begin with after wholesale cost, that single fee consumes nearly a third of the entire profit on the transaction, and it rises every time the price per gallon rises, since it's calculated as a percentage, not a flat rate. Nationally, stations paid an estimated $10.7 billion in swipe fees in 2020 alone, a number that keeps climbing as card usage replaces cash at the pump. There is another cost, growing slower but hitting harder than any line item on the P&L, because it isn't measured in cents. It's measured in 6 figures, and it's sitting in the ground. Underground storage tank liability is the one risk category that scales past anything else on this list. EPA data puts the average tank upgrade at $100,000 and the average contamination cleanup at $125,000 to $130,000. But that's the average. Cleanups that reach groundwater have run past $1 million, according to EPA figures, depending on the extent of contamination. More than half of the roughly 415,000 active underground storage tanks in the U.S. are over 25 years old, and tanks are typically rated for a 30-year service life. That means a huge share of the industry is operating tanks, approaching the point where a leak becomes statistically more likely, not less. A single confirmed leak, one that reaches groundwater, can cost more than the entire original investment used to open the station, wiping out years of accumulated profit in one inspection report. Unlike a slow rise in card fees or a gradual wholesale price shift, a leak doesn't announce itself gradually. Monitoring systems can run clean for years and then flag a release in a single quarterly test, converting a profitable, fully operating station into a site under a state-mandated cleanup order overnight, with the owner on the hook regardless of how the contamination happened. This is the risk that ended Getty Petroleum's lease dispute in the first place. This can end the business in a single event. Some things get better with scale. Bulk fuel purchasing improves wholesale terms per gallon. Fixed compliance costs, tank monitoring systems, insurance underwriting, accounting, spread across more locations per dollar. A strong food or car wash program compounds foot traffic into higher margin sales that fuel alone can't generate. Negotiating leverage with card processors also improves once transaction volume reaches a scale worth competing for. But other things get harder, not easier. Environmental liability doesn't average down with scale. It multiplies. Each additional site is another set of tanks that can leak, another remediation bill waiting to happen, another state's regulatory regime to track. Staffing complexity multiplies too, since a multi-site operator is managing shift coverage, cash reconciliation, and compliance documentation across locations that don't share a single set of local inspectors or fire codes. Getty Realty's right model, owning the dirt under 900-plus stations and leasing it out, shows where this ends. At scale, the business stops being about selling gasoline and becomes a real estate and environmental liability holding company that happens to have pumps on the property. Subtract payroll, lease, insurance, and routine tank compliance, and the owner nets somewhere around $150,000 to $250,000 for the year. Everything went right. Realistic scenario. Wholesale prices swing the way they did in 2008, compressing fuel margins for several months, while competitors reprice faster. Card processing fees keep climbing as a percentage of a higher pump price, and a routine tank test comes back showing a slow leak, triggering a $130,000 remediation bill under EPA rules. Recalculate, and that $150,000 plus net profit is gone for the year, replaced by a loss, with the remediation bill alone exceeding what many single station owners have in liquid savings. The difference between those two scenarios is one price swing, one card fee cycle, and one failed tank test. None of these are exotic disasters. All three happen to someone in this industry every week. Stack two in the same year. A margin squeeze during the exact quarter a tank test comes back positive. And a station that looked stable in January can be asking a bank for emergency credit by summer. Across all small businesses, roughly 20 to 23% fail within the first year, and about half are gone within 5 years, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data. In fuel retail specifically, The number of convenience stores selling fuel hit 122,620 in 2025, the highest level in 8 years, according to NACS. Even as the underlying economics stay this thin, which tells you consolidation and careful operating discipline matter more than raw growth. The primary cause of failure in this business is almost never a lack of hustle at the register. It's a fixed environmental or credit liability, hitting a business with no cash reserve to absorb it. Survivors share specific habits. They keep UST leak detection and line testing current rather than deferring it, since a caught leak costs a fraction of an uncaught one. They carry pollution liability insurance sized to a worst-case cleanup, not the state minimum. They diversify revenue toward the C-store and food program, instead of treating fuel as the profit center. They negotiate card processing rates and consider cash price incentives to offset the per-gallon fee bleed. And they keep a cash reserve sized for a 6-figure remediation bill, not just a slow sales month. None of those 5 habits require a busier corner, a bigger canopy, or a louder price sign. They require treating the station as what it actually is, a thin margin fuel pass-through, sitting on top of a buried environmental liability, rather than what it looks like from the pump island. That corner lot with cars lined up is real. So is the $130,000 average cleanup bill, sitting under a quarter of the industry's aging tanks, and the 800 stations that went dark in a single bankruptcy filing tied to exactly that liability. The gas station business isn't selling gasoline. It's managing a thin margin fuel pass-through wrapped around a buried environmental risk that can erase years of profit overnight. If this kind of numbers-first breakdown is useful, subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming.